All right, a few things I wanted to talk about in this video. First thing is that this titanium Easy Flux 125 amp MIG welder, this is a flux core wire MIG welder, no gas needed. I bought this thing maybe 2 months ago. This thing is very handy. It is extremely handy. It runs on any old outlet. 125 amp sounds, if you're new to MIG welding, that doesn't mean you need a 125 amp breaker. This thing runs on a 15 amp breaker. You could have a 100-foot extension cord into your driveway somewhere, and you could use this thing. It is super handy. Doesn't need gas, like I said. Flux core, what does that mean? Well, it's flux core wire. The flux is what's protecting the weld from the outside elements. Gas, shielding gas, is what would protect it if it wasn't flux core, if it was just regular wire. And without a doubt, shielding gas welder will make a better weld. Without a doubt. It's nicer, it's a lot less violent. It makes a really good weld. The problem is you got to lug around a bottle. The bottle looks like that, right? That's maybe it's out of the picture, you can't see it, but it's right here. And also, if it's windy out and you're doing this outside, it makes it very difficult to use gas. You have to turn the gas up extremely high because the wind is going to blow the gas out of there and nothing's going to be shielding and you won't be able to weld. This thing, any condition, well, not a rainstorm. You can't use this, I wouldn't use it as a rainstorm. But as far as wind is concerned, you can use it anywhere in wind. It works great. It's very handy. I would call this thing a lawnmower fixer. This thing just fixes stuff. You need to weld something that broke up to, say, 3/16. This normally 125 amps, 125. 0.125 is an eighth. That's how usually you do it. But this thing will do 3/16. And I can honestly, you could probably do a little bit thicker if you just cranked everything up and went slow. You could probably get something done as long as you weren't trying to do 2 feet of, half-inch steel. Well, that's ridiculous. But this thing just fixes stuff, and it is super handy. I have been using it like crazy. If you're looking to get into MIG welding, $200 is what this thing's going to cost you, plus some wire and plus a couple other little things. For under $300, when it's all said and done, you can weld. And I can tell you right now, you will just weld. You really will. But I mean, the tip I'll give you right off the bat is this wire that comes out of here. Just make sure that you don't have this thing sticking out past, say, a 1/4 inch. If this thing is sticking out really far, it's going to get all ragged and it's going to break off. It's not going to work out for you, and you're not going to know what the hell is going on. But if you keep this thing 1/4 inch, 3/8, and you keep, the gun really close to the part, you're going to be able to weld. It is that simple. And I would highly suggest anybody, let's say you got something it's broken, right? A piece of metal that's broken, and to replace it, it's going to cost you, $70, $80, $100 or something like that. Order this thing and try and weld it. I bet you'll be able to weld it and it'll be fixed. And you'll save $100 on this and you'll learn a new skill. I'm telling you. I'll leave a link in the description to this. Now that we've talked about how much I love this thing, let's talk about the one thing that's not very good, and that is this ground. And all these cheap welders, they all have just bad grounds, and it is what it is. But you can replace one of these things with a really good ground for not much money. Even honestly, this welder right here, this Everlast 250EX, this is a water-cooled welder, so it's a 250, meaning you need a 220 outlet. You can run this thing on a 110, but to get the 250 amp max, you need to run on a 220. Even this one, which costs $2,000 plus tax, which is cheap, honestly. I would call this still a cheap, it's like watches, welders. Welders are like watches for money. You can buy a $200 watch, you can buy a $2,000 watch, and it sounds like it's a lot, but you can buy $1 million watch. And that's really what it comes down to, is that welders can be in it, they're not $1 million, but there can be a ridiculous amount of money. $2,000 isn't expensive. I'll link to this one as well in the description. But even this one, the ground is good. Let me find it right here. The ground is good. You can see it compared to this one. right? It looks a lot better. But you might say, okay, this thing's awesome. But then when I go and I tell you, I just bought this Lincoln Electric ground for $8 on Amazon, are you kidding with me? So you just spent $2,000 on a welder, and for $8, you bought a ground like this. So I don't understand what's happening with grounds. I don't know where people are saving money. I don't know how Lincoln Electric, I'm going to link to this. If you need a new ground, which I highly suggest, for $8, you buy this ground and take this one off if you buy this welder, or even this welder. I bought 2 of these. I'm going to change this one at some point in time in the future when it gets a little crusty. But I don't know how Lincoln is selling this thing for $8. I mean, this thing is so strong compared to this thing. This is nothing. This thing is like Captains of Crush #2. This thing is so freaking tight. It's amazing. And it seems a little stupid to put this on this, but I don't really care. I don't really care. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to replace this ground with this one. And the reason we're replacing this ground, one, is obviously it's not as good as this, but also I welded this to a part by accident. Oh shit. This is what happens. Push your hood. And I'm going to tell you, this is another thing, if you're new to MIG welding, I want to talk to you quickly, before we change this, about how I was able to weld this ground to the part. I wasn't wearing a hood. And what can happen is that when you don't wear a hood, you have to close your eyes. You get ready to, you put the gun in the right spot, and you're going to pull the trigger, and right before you pull the trigger, you close your eyes. And then that's good for tacking. It's fine because you're not going to move your hand. You're just going to hit the trigger for a half second, and then you're going to let it go of it. That's good. That's okay. Well, you should always wear a hood. But what I'm saying is that if you try and actually move the gun and try and weld a bead, you will get disorientated and you'll go all over the place. That's what happens to me. And that's what I did. And I kept my finger on the trigger, and I was off the piece, and the wire just kept getting longer and getting longer until it hit the ground and welded the ground. And I didn't even know it until I opened my eyes. So if you're tacking, okay. But if you're trying to actually weld something, hood. This is a Lincoln Electric 3350. This is an incredible hood. This hood costs twice as much as this welder. Spend the money on the hood. That is a suggestion I'm going to give you. And I know you're going to say to yourself, you want to you want to get through this cheap or something like that, and you don't want to spend $400 on a hood. Okay, you don't have to spend $400 on a hood. But don't spend $50 on a hood and $1,000 on a welder. Don't do it. Don't do it. Auto darkening, look for an auto darkening one that's in your price range. That's what you want. Auto darkening is going to mean that you can keep your eyes open and you will see the part, and you can pull the trigger, and then it will darken it automatically. Usually it's going to run on batteries, just like a watch battery. It's way better. It's way better. Because what will happen is that if you don't have an auto darkening one, you have to have the hood up, you're going to look, and then you're going to put down, and then you're going to say a little prayer that your arm is still in the same spot until you pull the trigger. Because until you pull the trigger, it's not going to light up and you're not going to see anything. But just like when you try and weld without a hood and you're closing your eyes, that's what's going to happen to you when you pull this thing down. Between the time you pull it down and pull the trigger, you're going to be in darkness and you're going to get disorientated. That's what's going to happen, I guarantee it. Auto darkening hoods, no one should buy a non-auto darkening hood as far as I'm concerned. If you're a professional and you've been using non-auto darkening hoods for 40 years, all right, that's great. But if you're new to this MIG welding stuff or any type of welding, auto darkening hood, spend the money on the hood. All right, let's change this ground. And, oh, by the way, if bad ground, that's how you get electrocuted. If there's no ground, you're the ground. That's it, period. Same thing with an outlet. If there's no ground wire and outlet and there's a short and you touch it, well, you're the ground now. So you always want to make sure that you have a good ground. All right, let's do this. All right, here's the cheap ground. Now I can just cut this off, and that's what I'll do right there. But I'm also going to cut this so it's stripped and into a little eyelet, and then it's nutted on. So now let's strip this one. 8-gauge eyelet will do it. Obviously, we got to make this a little bit shorter, and we'll also get some heat shrink. All right, so I'm using a 10 millimeter tube, and let's take a look here. We can cut that off right there. I think we might need to sharpen these. Now I got these vice grip Irwins. These things are freaking awesome. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. Lincoln, this thing is good to 300 amps. So I think we'll be good with this little Harbor Freight one. It's interesting. I almost want to say, look at this. You can't even get this sticker off. It's almost like they're selling these things for $8, like as advertising. Well, we'll just leave the sticker on, I guess. So we're going to go in here and see that little hole there. And, you know, I have to say, I think that this thing might be a little bit loose. Let's drill a hole in here. Okay, you don't have to drill a hole in there, but I felt like, it might be nice. Just keep that thing from flopping around. And we don't want to go nuts here. We just want to make sure it's tight. And then I'm going to zip tie this thing on here. And make sure it's tight, and we'll cut this off. And then I'm just going to swivel it to the inside. Well, we got the dogs going crazy. That's just great. All right. Yeah. Look at this thing. That is, that's a ground clamp. Let me show you the close-up now of all three of them together. All right, here's a top-down view of the three next to each other. You can really see the difference. This is the titanium one. This is the Everlast. Remember, this is part of a $2,000 welder setup. And this is the $8 Lincoln. Look at that. Look at the difference. And another cool thing about a bigger ground clamp is that they can open up further. That is nice, because sometimes, like look at this one. You can't really open this thing up at all, right? This makes it so that you can kind of ground to anything. Doesn't matter if it's really big, where you wouldn't be able to put this thing on it. That just makes it convenient. Yeah, it's definitely harder to open, but that makes it for a better connection. That's it. Let's wrap this video up. I'm happy I got this thing changed. And you can see how chewed up it is right there. I feel a little bit safer, and I also feel like it's not going to slip off, and I can connect it, to bigger things, and it's just going to make a better connection for $8. I'll link to this in the description. It's on Amazon. It's ridiculous that this thing is $8. It really is. It makes this thing look like a $2 a $2 ground clamp. And look at the difference in the grounding cable right there. It's twice as thick as this one. It's hard to tell, but this is twice as thick. All right, everyone. Catch you on the next one. See ya.